The ballroom was alive with the soft hum of conversation, the elegant clinking of champagne glasses, and the rustle of opulent gowns. An exclusive gala for the city's elites. It was the night of the annual charity event that drew the most influential families, the wealthiest patrons, and the most powerful figures in the country. There were whispers about who would be making the largest donations, who would outshine whom with the most extravagant dress or dazzling jewelry. It was the epitome of high society, an evening where money and power were on full display. At the center of the gathering stood Victoria Blackwell, the matriarch of the Blackwell family, a woman who had inherited her wealth through generations of business moguls. Her gown shimmered under the lights, adorned with diamonds that could buy a small island. She was a queen in this world, her every movement calculated, her every word a display of power. Beside her, her two closest friends Lucinda Taylor and Felicity Mitchell watched the proceedings with similar poise, each in designer dresses that screamed exclusivity. The air in the ballroom was thick with privilege, but as the evening unfolded, something unexpected happened. The doors to the ballroom suddenly creaked open, and in walked a woman who could not have been more out of place in this world. Her clothes were faded, the fabric worn thin from years of use, and her shoes were scuffed and old. The room fell silent for a moment as all eyes turned toward her. This woman, an elderly figure with gray hair and a small, frail frame, made her way into the lavish space with a slow, deliberate pace. She held a modest purse in her hands, her skin showing the years of hardship she had weathered. Her presence immediately caused a stir. Whispers began to spread like wildfire. Who was she? How had she gotten in? The laughter in the room was almost audible, muffled by the masks of politeness everyone tried so hard to wear. Did she get lost? Whispered Lucinda, her voice laced with disdain. She must be in the wrong place, Felicity added, her lips curling with mockery. Victoria Blackwell, ever the symbol of perfection, stared at the woman with raised eyebrows, her mind already making judgments. She turned to her friends and said, just loud enough for others to hear, who invited this person? She doesn't belong here. Despite the harsh whispers and the blatant stares, the elderly woman, who introduced herself as Margaret Howard, seemed unaffected. She continued her journey deeper into the ballroom, moving with a quiet dignity that contrasted starkly with the ostentatious display around her. It was as though she was used to being judged, and nothing could shake her calm. Victoria, unable to contain her growing irritation, approached a nearby staff member and loudly remarked, "There's clearly been some mistake. This woman doesn't belong here. Someone should check the guest list." Margaret's serenity remained unshaken. She did not seem to care about the murmurs behind her, nor the haughty gazes that followed her every step. She was simply here, in her quiet way, to observe. The event continued, and yet there was an undercurrent of discomfort in the air, especially around Victoria and her friends. They made crude comments about the elderly woman's presence, laughing amongst themselves, their voices dripping with condescension. "Maybe she's here to beg for money," Lucinda sneered. "She's probably just a charity case, a way to make the donors feel good about themselves." Margaret, however, did not flinch. Her face was still, her eyes kind but unwavering. She heard every word, but it did not seem to bother her in the least. Her gaze swept over the crowd, never once letting their scorn affect her. There was something about her quiet presence that seemed to challenge everything the elites held dear. And then, the moment of revelation came. The gala's host, the renowned hospital director Richard Thornton, stepped onto the stage to announce the evening's generous donor. He cleared his throat, his voice booming across the ballroom, and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight, we are honored to receive an incredibly generous donation from a benefactor who has chosen to remain anonymous. This donation, a staggering $50 million, will go toward funding our new children's hospital wing." The room gasped. A donation of that magnitude could change lives, transform the future of thousands of children. But the real shock came when Richard continued, "This remarkable individual is with us tonight. Please join me in welcoming Mrs. Margaret Howard." The room went completely silent. Victoria Blackwell, her mouth agape, watched as Margaret Howard, the poor, elderly woman they had ridiculed moments earlier, slowly made her way to the stage. "Mrs. Howard," Richard continued, his voice filled with reverence, "we cannot thank you enough for your generosity. Your contribution will change countless lives. We are forever in your debt." The crowd remained frozen. No one knew how to react. It was as if the ground had shifted beneath their feet. Margaret, now standing before them, revealed the truth. She was not the poor, lost woman they had assumed her to be, but a billionaire philanthropist who had been quietly reshaping the lives of the most vulnerable. For years, Victoria and her friends were mortified. All the arrogant remarks, the cruel judgments, the laughs, they now felt like poison in their mouths. But there was no time to retract their words. The damage had already been done. Margaret's eyes, filled with compassion, scanned the room as she addressed them. "I chose to remain anonymous for a reason," she said softly, her voice carrying across the room. "I don't give because of recognition or fame. I give because I believe it is our duty to help those who cannot help themselves. And tonight, I hope you all realize that true value comes not from appearances or wealth, but from what we do for others." Victoria, her heart sinking, was now fully aware of her mistake. She had judged Margaret based on her own preconceived notions, her blind belief that wealth and power defined a person's worth. But now, she saw that Margaret's true worth was something far more profound: kindness, humility, and generosity. As the applause from Margaret rang out, Victoria's mind raced. She had been wrong. She had judged based on skin color, on wealth, on status, and now, in front of everyone, she had to face her own arrogance. Margaret Howard had just shattered her narrow view of the world, and the lesson didn't stop there. Margaret continued, her voice carrying a deeper meaning. "In this world, we often define people by their wealth, their appearance, and their social standing, but that is not the true measure of a person's worth. It is the heart, the kindness, the actions that matter most. I hope tonight, you all will take this lesson to heart." Victoria stood frozen, surrounded by the stunned faces of the guests. The reality of her actions, the ugliness of her prejudices, weighed heavily on her. She had been a part of a world that valued material possessions over human connection. But now, she understood, it was kindness that mattered most. In the weeks that followed, Victoria made a profound change. She stepped away from the world of high society and used her wealth to fund programs for underprivileged children, many of whom were the very people she had once overlooked. She worked alongside Margaret, learning from her humility and grace, and slowly, the wall of arrogance she had built around herself began to crumble. The most important lesson Victoria learned was that true wealth was not measured in gold or jewels, but in the ability to change, to grow, and to help others. Margaret's quiet presence had shown her that the real value of a person lies not in their external appearance, but in their heart. And as for Margaret Howard, she continued to change lives, quietly and humbly, always teaching those who crossed her path the true meaning of generosity. The lesson: never judge someone by their appearance or status, for beneath the surface, there may be a heart that holds more wealth than you could ever imagine. True greatness lies in kindness, humility, and the courage to live with integrity.